Oh, there we go. All right, next slide. There we go. Actually, this is Jared's slide. And I was asked to do an introduction to this, and I just wanted to let you all know, kind of set the stage, is that you all probably know that we've been working on this thing called PPRL for probably 2+ years now. And for the folks who aren't familiar with it, I just want to remind everybody that PPRL, Privacy Preserving Record Linkage, is a de-identified linkage, meaning that no PII ever leaves the site. The linkage is a de-identified linkage. So we have been using this technology for things that you have heard about, linking different types of data, what sometimes referred to as multimodal data. But there's other things we are planning on using it for. One is recruitment, which we'll get to another day. But today we want to talk about something called de-duplication and why this is important. So the map on the right is Jared created this map, and I asked permission to use the slide because I think it's really very illustrative. Of the 3,030 counties in America, N3C now has over 20 people in 2,800 of them. So just the gray ones are ones that we don't have at least 20 people. We may have people in it, but it has to be the minimum. And it's pretty amazing. And when you think about it, that means we're pretty much covering most of the country, 92% specifically, getting patients. And so our patients now exist in every state, but they also travel to different states where we're also getting their records because they were on vacation or they got hurt or they got sick or whatever. In addition, we're doing that record linkage, the CMS and the viral variants, the mortality. And today went live, Medicaid went live today. And of course, Medicare went live October 1st of last year. So suddenly a single person, John Doe, we don't know who he is, but the John Doe that's identified as a hash could actually be at two institutions, and I always use Duke and UNC because they're just 10 miles down the road from each other, but that same person actually could be in the mortality data set that's linked, and they could be in Medicaid, and there are some people who are in Medicaid and Medicare. And so this person could show up 4 or 5 or 6 times. And so suddenly, because there's so much data starting to come in from different places, de-duplicating it and harmonizing that data is becoming really important to your science, because particularly you're doing something like rare disease, or you have a small population, you could be affecting your science by not being aware of this. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm almost done. The only thing I want to do is say is that of the 77 sites that we get data, only 45 are doing PPRL. This is an issue, and then we want to get the other 30 almost sites, because if we don't get PPRL from those 30 sites, we really don't know if there's duplicates. So when we're telling you that there's duplicates, it's of the sites we know, and I think that's important. And the last thing I'll say is that this is very powerful. We basically are creating a de-identified national patient system where if you went to Walgreens or Duke, we would know that you're the same person. But with that power, it's actually very complicated. And so the rest of the team is going to really talk to you about our beginning to look at this. And we're kind of at the bleeding edge. Nobody's ever done this at this scale before. And the good, the bad, and the ugly of how we're going to kind of start conservatively, and as we all learn, we're going to expand it. So I think that's all I really wanted to say. But thank you all for going along this long ride with us.
Sean, I can take over. Sean, you wanna maybe?
Oh, okay. I'm gonna introduce that, but then I couldn't my Zoom again. All right.
Okay. Is it okay if the first part of this is I wanted to do a quick demo on the enclave and show where to find the data, what is the feature, where are the global IDs that allow you to deduplicate the data. And then I'll talk about some high-level statistics, and then I can pass it over to you, Sean. Let me share. Can you all see my screen? Okay. So this is the home screen of the Enclave. Some of you are probably already familiar with it. Typically, when you have an approved DUR to do your work on LDS or de-identified data, then you have a workspace in which you can import the OMOP datasets. And these OMOP datasets are available in this data catalog. And so one of the main, and so depending on the level of access, you might be using de-identified data collection or LDS data collection. And so one of the tables or data sets of interest in this case is called the person table. So the person table is the table that has all the patient's IDs and some of the demographics. And so this is where we made the updates to allow you to help deduplicating patients or know which patients with different person IDs are actually the same patients. And so what we did is the person table has the primary key of the person table is person ID. And so now I'll be showing how the person table looks like without, I'm hiding the data for the purposes of this presentation. And let me just, so basically here on the left-hand side, you have all the columns of this person table, and each row has a different person ID. This is the primary key, and this is how patients have been identified within N3C. What we added to this table, and this is the person ID column. What we added to this table is all the way towards the end. We added a new column called global person ID. And so this global person ID has new identifiers which uniquely identify each N3C patient. So if you have a patient, John Doe, who went to both UNC and Duke, and they have two different person IDs because they went to two different sites. Now with this global ID column, they will have the same global ID. So you'll be able to say that it is actually the same patients. And so this is the global ID column that we added. And in many cases when, and I'll talk about this a little bit, when there is a global ID available, meaning when there is either a duplicate or a linkage to another data source such as CMS, you will see a global ID that starts with N3C colon and then a number. If either there is no duplicates, or for the sites that have not signed up to PPRL, we don't know whether there is a duplicate or not. So this is this category unknown. So for a number of patients, we don't know whether there is a linkage or a duplicate because the sites or the data partner have not signed to PPRL. That's for about 6.8 million patients. For others, we have the sites have signed up to PPRL, but there was no linkage found. And that's for about 11.4 million patients. And I'll present some high-level statistics in a bit, but I just wanted to show where to find the person table and where to find the column that will help you deduplicate the patients if you need to deduplicate them for your analysis. The second update that we did is you may be wondering which data partners have signed up to PPRL, which ones have signed up to PPRL but have not agreed to link with CMS or have agreed to link with CMS. So all of that information had been added to the manifest table. So this is also a table available in the data catalog. And so again, here I'll be showing, whoops, I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Let me open it up and share again to show you. Okay, so sharing again. Sorry about that. So in this manifest table, you have 1 row per data partner ID. And we added 4 new columns, site-to-site linkage, CMS linkage, mortality linkage, and viral variant linkage. So this column is telling you which data partners have signed up for PPRL, and therefore they are participating in the deduplication process. So 40 sites, 40 released sites out of the 45 that have signed up. You can see their, you can find their data partner ID here. Out of those 40, 19 of them have also signed up to link their data to the CMS claims. And then mortality linkage, 24 sites. For 24 of these sites, we are also linking to mortality records. And then we have 6 data partners for which we are also linking to viral variant PPRL data. So just to recap, 2 updates for the purposes of your analysis. 1 in the person table, we're giving you the global person ID. And then 1 in the manifest table that is showing you which sites are participating, are doing deduplication. That's the site-to-site linkage, and which sites are also linking their data to claims, mortality, or viral variants. Another update is that in order to help you, so in the person table, you'll be able to know which persons have a global ID. And if they have a global ID, that means either they have duplicates from for other in other sites, or we can link their records to claims, to the CMS claims. But we also added a helper template to help you derive person ID to person ID pairs and be able to tell whether it is a linkage or it is an intra-site duplicate, meaning that it's a duplicate within the same site, say UNC, or whether it's an inter-site duplicate, meaning that the same person went to 2 different sites, and so they have different person IDs and different data person IDs, different data partner IDs, but it is the same person. So if you go to the knowledge store, you will see that we added a new knowledge object called duplicate person ID pairs. And so this has a code workbook, and I won't spend time on it. I just wanted to show that it exists and that it basically shows you the logic to start from the person table with the global ID and get to a data set that shows you the person ID to person ID pairs and the type of duplication that it is, whether it's an intra-site duplicate or an inter-site duplicate. But it also has logic that shows you the persons that have a global ID, but no duplicates, because these are just linkages to CMS claims. And so within this knowledge object, we have a code template, but we also have a person ID, duplicate person ID pairs data set. And so here you will be able to see for the patients that have a global ID, each person ID to person ID pair, as well as the duplication type, whether it's an intra-site duplicate or an inter-site duplicate. So that's all I wanted to show from the platform. Let me just go back to give some high-level statistics. I already talked about the manifest table and the fact that we have 41 sites that are doing site-to-site linkage, and therefore we can do deduplication for these sites. 21 of those sites also signed up to do a CMS linkage. So you will see, you'll be able to link their data to the CMS claims datasets that are in the data catalog. And then 26 sites are allowing us to link their records to mortality. 6 sites are allowing us to link their records to viral variants. Now, in terms of statistics about the duplicate patients, out of 18 million or 18.9 million patients, with the global IDs that we currently have, we have 532,000 patients who have global IDs. So these patients are deduplicate to or are correspond to 488,000 unique patients from 35 unique data partners. And the rest, about 11.5 million patients, these are for data partners that have signed up to do PPRL and deduplication, but no linkage or duplicate was found. And then the rest of these, so 6.8 million patients, these are from data partners who are not participating in PPRL or the linkage, and therefore it is not possible to know whether there are duplicates or not. Among these persons who have global IDs, there are about 11,000 intra-site duplicates that go down to 5,500 unique patients. And the rest, 75, so these are patients that are duplicates within the same site, meaning within Duke, for example, you would see 2 different person IDs, but it is actually in reality the same person. With regards to inter-site duplicates, so John Doe go into both UNC and Duke, 75, almost 76,000 patients correspond to 38,000 unique patients. And then the rest, almost more than 400,000 patients. These are patients who have global IDs, but not because they have duplicate patients in the EHR, but because they are linked to other PPR. They have other PPRR records such as CNS. So I'm going to stop here and pass it to you, Sean, but these are hopefully helpful statistics to get an idea of the scale of the duplication as we have. Obviously, this data will update every week at every release. And we are also, currently we're working on adding global IDs for other data modalities such as imaging and mortality. So most of the global IDs are for either the duplicate persons or the Medicare claim, the patients who have records in Medicare or Medicaid claims. So I will stop sharing here and pass it over to you, Sean.
Sure. I did want to bring up one quick note when Ken was mentioning the percentage of counties that have patients in them. I heard that before, and it made me realize that we actually have 5% of the US population in our database. So just about 1 in 20 people. Ken, did you have another note that you wanted to add quick before I jump in?
Yeah, just I wanted to give people a little bit of warm and comfort. The information right now is, the global ID is just informational. And the team is going to go over this in more detail, but I just want to make sure all people are sure that we're not affecting your studies or how you're doing your science in any way. Your analysis hasn't changed because of this. And I just want to make sure that people aren't worried that we're somehow preemptively doing something to your data. We are not. And I just want to let folks know that.
Good call, Ken. Yeah, these are a couple of new columns, one in the person table and I think 4 in the manifest table that describes what linkage different sites are participating in. So I'm going to briefly talk about just some considerations for research. And I didn't come up with most of these considerations. A lot of them came from the Logic Liaisons group, but I've sort of organized a variety of thoughts together on things you might consider as you're working with these data. So in a complex case, a single individual like Jane Doe could in theory have lots of different identifiers if Jane Doe had visited a lot of different data sources. So for example, Jane Doe could have visited data partner 4444, and that site would give her this ID. A different data site, a different data partner would give her a different ID. And potentially within a particular data partner, she might get two different IDs, record keeping errors, name changes, stuff like that. As Saad has described, the way that this links together is via this new global ID column in the OMOP person table, which is also used to link that global ID to the individual person IDs that are used for each individual site. And so this site up here I'm illustrating is not participating in PPRL, and so we don't actually know that these two records also refer to Jane Doe, and we don't even know that they refer to the same person. So in that person table for these entries, you would see unknown because data partner 111 does not participate in the linkage. So that's one place that we get sort of information about duplicate IDs. Another one, let me quickly note before I move on. So the lesson here is to be careful. Not all sites are participating, and that manifest table will tell you which sites are participating, and you might have a chance of finding some of these duplicates. So this is one way that we can get this duplicate information. Another one is the CMS data. So as of up until now, the viral variant and the mortality information has person IDs and data partner IDs that are made to match what's in the EHR data. So that's already been sort of unified. Partially because they're just simpler data sources. We sort of get one essential source for viral variants, and we don't need to worry too much about who that is unless we found out via other means that those are the same person. The CMS data, however, is more complicated. Someone who has data in Medicare or Medicaid could actually have data from multiple sites in that CMS data, and they could have data from a site that's not participating with N3C at all, right? And so Jane Doe, for example, may have some Medicaid data at this data partner and this data partner and this data partner. And those records might be reflected in the EHR data that we get from those data partners, and they might also be reflected in the CMS data that we get from the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. At the same time, there might be records for this particular patient at this particular site that are not present in the CMS data because potentially they were not eligible for CMS at that time when they got that record. Or there might be things in the CMS data that have no corresponding record in the EMS because they were served those services at a provider that is not one of our N3C partners, but nevertheless, we get their CMS data through the workflow. So in the end, the CMS records overlap partially with the EHR records. Now, another sort of wrinkle here is that due to the way that CMS data and EHR data are entered, there may be some shifts for those events that are replicated in both places. So for example, if Jane got some information or got a service at data partner 4444, potentially they entered that record with the service date, and then over in the CMS data, the same event is there. Potentially it's been shifted a little bit because they used the billing date or something like that. So that's something to kind of be aware of. Another thing to be aware of is that some of our data partners do what we call pre-shifting. So these are data partners that are adding plus or minus some amount of days to every individual person ID that they send to N3C before N3C gives it. And this might be something like, plus or minus 30 days or plus or minus 7 days. Not many data partners do this, and the date range is not very large generally. But some do, and you might, for example, have a situation where Jane's records at this data partner have been shifted by the site by some amount. You don't know that they've all been shifted 12 days forward. Nevertheless, they have been. And so because you know that this site is participating in date shifting, it's going to be really hard to mix records from this data partner with records for this data partner, even though you know that they refer to the same person because you don't have very accurate time information on one of them. Unless, of course, you don't care about when things happen, you only care about that they happen. So be careful of sites that pre-shift their data. And again, this is something that you can see in the manifest table that will tell you information about sites and whether or not they are participating in this pre-shifting scheme. And then, of course, we have our level 2 data. In our level 2 data, N3C does this as well. We add a plus or minus 180-day date shift. And this is done per data partner per person ID. So even though Jane Doe, these are all the same, all IDs for Jane Doe, in the level 2 N3C data, they're all going to get different date shifts. And so for this reason, you want to be really careful about what you do in the level 2 data with this global ID information, again, unless you don't care about when things happen. So what are some things you might do with this analysis? Well, if you're working in the level 3 data, you might just unify all these global IDs, use the global ID when it's available, and otherwise use the individual person ID. The trouble here is that you're probably not going to be able to control for site or for data partner ID in your analysis. And that's a really common best practice because sites do have very different patterns in how they code things, what kind of information they can capture, and so on and so forth. And so if you're collapsing information across multiple sites for an individual, now you have trouble determining which site, quote unquote, that individual came from. And so you might need to get creative or think about the best way to do that with your analysis. You could unify within site only. So for Jane's records, potentially I just unify her 11111 records and her 66666 records, which gives me some deduplication benefit. But of course, if you leave them in there across different sites, you still look like you have multiple patients, even though you have a single patient across the different sites. You could do something like a unify within site. That's usually a fairly safe thing to do, unless, of course, date shifting is in play. And then just drop all of the other sites' data, right? So you could sort of say, well, this patient has the vast majority of their records at this one site. So even though I know that they have also visited these 2 other sites or something like that, I'm going to drop those. That way I don't have to worry about confoundings if I'm doing a regional analysis or something like that. All of these, anytime you're attempting to do this sort of unification or deduplication, you really want to be aware of that date shifting. Check to see if your data partners are performing date shifting in the level 3 data, if you're doing level 3 date shifting or level 3 analyses. And if you're in level 2 data, you really want to only unify these records in very specialized conditions. Some of the things you might do, and you can do this in sort of level 3 and level 2, which is just to keep one site and ID representative. So potentially in Jane Doe, I might know that there are lots of different records for this person due to that global ID information, but I can't mix them together by date because of all the date shifting. I might just say, you know what, this particular patient ID at this particular site has the vast majority of the data, so I will pick that to be their home and then drop all the other information. And you can, of course, if you really think it's appropriate for your study, drop all the linked data. Maybe you're doing a very tight regional analysis and you don't want any frequent flyers in there who might be visiting multiple locations. And you're not interested in including information from patients within a site that might be duplicated across person IDs. And as Ken had mentioned, you could do all of what you've been doing already. You can simply ignore the new linkage information and the information in the manifest table. All of the existing code as of now will continue to work because these are just some new additional columns. All right, and that is all that I have. Let me stop the share here and we'll see if there's any questions. I will say that the logic liaisons team is starting to look at this data and they're going to be having more informative things that you might do with the data, possibly. It depends on how well they're able to figure it out for common analysis types. And you can use the chat. Or the Q&A. Actually, the Q&A would be good, or I think we can turn on people's mics if they want to just talk their question out loud. All right. Looks
John,
like we
one thing I think that my memory is correct. Of the 3 of the sites that are doing PPRL, the only 2 do date shifting. One of them has no longer date shift, and then the other 2, one of them is fixing it, is going to stop doing it, and I can't remember the other one. So it definitely exists, but just so you, yeah, and you guys have this information to manifest, but this, luckily enough, it's only 2 sites that are actually doing PPRL right now.
And so this has provided some incentive for sites to not do the date shifting.
Yeah.
Christine Suver asks, what are the privacy concerns for individuals? Do you mean individual patients? I assume. I can't think of any especially new privacy concerns. Can you?
Let's see. So this, I think this is the answer to your question. You know, in your DUR, if you don't have access to CMS data or mortality data, you still aren't seeing it. So you know that there are duplicates inter or intra-site, because that's part of getting level 3 data or level 2 data without the full zip and dates. But it's not really impacting what you see in that way. So I don't think that the impact is really going to be of any significance as far as what you're seeing. You already were seeing these people, and now you know that they're at 2 different sites, but you're not seeing more data that you hadn't seen before. So we didn't feel like this was a you know, a concern in that way. Images are in N3C, but they're not yet available. They are not date shifted. And so we are testing this. So when it becomes available, we'll put out the details of that. And just FYI, those images are from MIDRC, which is funded by NIBIB, and University of Chicago is kind of like N3C is for images. And so it made sense that we combine these 2 different data types.
There was a question about potential timelines for sites newly participating in PPRL, and I know that we can't know that for sure because it's kind of up to the sites, but do you have any sense of how many holdouts we might yet get?
The answer is it's up to them. It's no cost. We pay for it all, and actual work of implementing it is probably, you know, less than 8 hours. It's not difficult to do, and there's a huge team to help people. Sorry, that was advertising. But I'm guessing, my hope is that we're going to get between 50 and 60 total. But what we put out a letter, so when Medicare came out, so let's say October 15th, we put out a letter saying, please encourage people to do it. And that came from Mike Carilla, and we're going to put out another letter next week to encourage the last site to try to participate on it. This is a huge benefit to everybody. And, you know, we hope to implement this well beyond COVID to keep the community linked together. So it's more than just doing this for COVID. So I encourage you to encourage your institution, if you're one of those that gets the letter, to go, please consider participating. And just a reminder is that if you participate, it doesn't mean you have to allow linkage to any data. The only thing you're committing to is allowing us to do deduplication. Each data type you control and give permission to. So if you want to allow us to link to mortality, you have that choice, and you can always rescind it, or CMS, or any combination. So it is the only thing the sites are really committed to. And this was that we felt this is important enough scientifically, is the deduplication. So anyway, I encourage you all to encourage other people to help us get these people to sign up.
Yeah, and I think Karen's mentioned the midrick imaging data. Another good thing about PPRL, more data modalities are ideally going to become available. I think we're still working on genomic viral variant information. Imaging is in the works. I forget what else is. Anyway, it's very cool to have so many different kinds of data in one location available for analysis. All right, any final questions? If not, we can call it here, and next time we have more information to provide, we'll let you know.
One final comment, Sean. Obviously this year, this is a new feature, and we've released some new columns and templates. If you have any questions about them when trying to use them, you can file an issue or stop by office hours, and we'll be happy to help you understand how to use them.
And the best practices documentation, I think we're going to make available within the enclave. And it basically, a lot of the things that Sean talked about, as we learn, this is a living document, but we're going to put together if you drop it, if you combine it, if you ignore it, what the consequences are for each different use case. And so you can kind of make an informed decision. And so this will just keep going on, and we appreciate any feedback from you all because it's incredibly helpful. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.